Okay, so one of the things that I haven't touched on, right? I've reacted to a lot of takes, but I haven't reacted to probably the most prominent person when it comes to this whole subject, which is, undisputed Skip and Shannon Sharp show. So I thought before this thing probably comes to an end, hopefully before the end of next month. Let's react to it. Let's get the thoughts out. Let's hear what people are saying. And kind of just do this whole thing right here, right now. So we don't have to continue to do it any further. I don't know. But I want to react to Skip and Shannon talking about this whole Baker Mayfield situation, because I think there's some interesting things that they said, some things that I think can be true, and some things that I think do need to be kind of cleared up or explained with further context, as you may. All right, let's get into it. This is Undisputed.
Well, it's a waiting game now, Skip. I just don't see a situation where something happens immediately unless the Browns either release him or takes on 85% of his remaining salary, which is about $18.9 million. Let's just round it up, say $19 million. If the Browns are willing to pay 85% of that salary, I believe they can probably get a sixth-round draft pick for it. Or they're going to have to release him outright and take on the full brunt of that $18.9 million salary. I don't see any way around it. Skip, Baker doesn't want to be there. The Browns really don't want him to be there. Baker is never going to be foolish enough to say, okay, I'll just waive my salary, y'all just release me. That's not going to happen. He's never going to get that frustrated, nor should he be. And they shouldn't expect him to come. I don't want this to be getting a situation where they have mandatory mini camps and they say, well, Baker didn't show up, we're going to fine him. Don't do him like that. You don't want him. Let the man go. Either just release him or take on 85% of the salary and move him. This is getting out of hand. It's too much now. I get it. Excuse me. Baker, you don't feel you can win long term, or you can go to places that Deshaun can take you. I get that. But now you're just being mean-spirited. Now you're just being nasty with the situation. Move on, Cleveland. Let this man go live his life elsewhere because you don't want it.
All right, so one thing I want to respond to about that is I think a lot of what Shannon Sharp is saying here is true. Neither side of this situation, I think, sometimes, especially in the offseason, and it's not fans' fault, right? But it's kind of how fans think of things. And, I'm a fan myself. And sometimes I catch myself thinking of these things. We think of football teams as if this is Madden, right? As if it's just put a player here, put another player here, do this whole thing for 6 weeks and then move on. These players are people. And when I say these players are people, what I'm saying is that the relationships matter. The people stuff matters, right? It isn't always about the stuff that's on paper, because that's what we can focus on sports a lot. And I think that misses a lot of the point of sports, right? Yeah, we can focus on paper, and on paper, the Browns technically don't have to do anything. But when it comes to the human stuff, it's not going to sit right with some people. It might mess up with the locker room. And we have seen last year where a great roster, a team that looked great on paper, can be destroyed by the relationships failing in that locker room. We saw this last year. We saw this in 2019. I don't know why Browns fans sometimes act like this can't happen, but it happens all the time in the NFL. What happens on paper and what is on paper only matters on paper, because the relationships do matter. We've learned this the hard way in Cleveland 2 times. So what Shannon is saying here does have a point. Where I will push back on is at this whole plea that the Browns have done anything wrong by Baker at this point. They have not wronged Baker, I think, at all at this point. They upgraded the quarterback position. He made it clear that he did not want to be here. When I say he, Baker Mayfield made it clear that he did not want to be here. He went over what most other players would. That affected his trade value. He's not traded. part of the reason he's not on another team right now is on Baker Mayfield. I don't see anybody, and I know for damn sure Skip Bayless isn't going to recognize that, but nobody is putting it on Baker on why he's not traded, which is he has made himself unappealing as a trade asset. He could have been moved on. And look, whether the Browns eat 18, 17, 16, or none of that money, it really doesn't matter. If he got traded, he would have got his money. Now, there is a situation where he can get cut, get his termination pay, and get more money from a base salary from another team if that's the way he chooses to go about it, because you can only take termination pay one time in your NFL career. This would be a great time for Baker Mayfield to take it. But even then, he would still get most of that money up front because it is guaranteed money in that fifth-year option. So either way, Baker's going to be fine financially. I don't think this is like a boo-hoo poor Baker thing. And also, the reason Baker Mayfield isn't traded yet, we've talked about this before, it's not because he's a terrible quarterback. He's all right. And all right normally can get traded. But when you just all right and you're posting letters and you're like leaking stuff to the media and you're kicking and screaming and you're doing all this other stuff that not even Matt Ryan, a former MVP, is doing. You know, Matt Ryan just as mad about the Deshaun Watson rumors for his team as Baker Mayfield was. Matt played it cool, got traded to Indy. Nobody kicked and screamed. He got moved. Baker Mayfield, albeit much less accomplished than Matt Ryan, and I think anybody would have taken Matt Ryan over Baker Mayfield, even though there's an argument to make when it comes to age there that I think people neglect. But when it comes to all of that, nobody wanted to make the move for Baker Mayfield because they feel like the wild card with Baker Mayfield is his attitude. And that is part of the reason why Baker Mayfield is not traded. Yeah, the Browns are doing him. I don't even think they're doing him anywhere close to dirty. But yeah, the Browns, could they have released him by now? Sure. Will they release him? I think it's likely. But that doesn't mean the Browns are being malicious. Now, to Shannon's point, if the Browns do something along the lines of fine Baker Mayfield for not showing up to a camp that they don't want him at, that's malicious. That's over the top. That's something that I would say is dirty, right? The Browns should not operate like that. I don't care what reason you find to justify it. That's not justifiable in my book. Even though it's my team, it's a team I love, I'm not going to justify that kind of behavior, because finding somebody for not being at work when you don't want them to be at work in the first place, come on, man. Like, what you want them to do? Show up? You don't want that to happen, so why would you even do that, right? You're just trying to be slick. You're playing a nasty game. That kind of stuff comes back on you. And that kind of stuff is what ruptures the locker room, because I think they make a good point here. Baker is not hated by the whole locker room, and I don't think he's hated by most of the locker room. He might be disliked, or his presence might not be welcomed by some in that locker room, but if you do him that dirty, which they aren't doing, and they have not showed any signs of doing and not threatened to do. So I don't know why people are assuming that they are going to do that. But if they do him like that, then yeah, that's a problem. That's going to cause a problem in the locker room, because doing anybody that dirty, even if it's somebody you don't like, if you're in that locker room, I know if I worked for the Browns and saw that they did that to Baker Mayfield, I'm like, man, are they going to do that to me? That's doing them dirty. But I don't think the Browns are going to do that. I think that's a hypothetical. But he does bring up a good point there. Let's see what else he has to say.
That's now, Skip. And for me, Baker's not a sympathetic figure. But they're almost turning him into one for the simple fact of how they're handling this situation. Here we are damn near in June. Everybody's at least at one camp, OTA, Skip, or a voluntary camp. Everybody's had at least one. Let this man go get a job. Let this man go get gainful employment from somewhere else. You don't want him. He doesn't want to be with you. Cleveland, you only got two choices. Skip, it's not like they got 7, 8 choices. They got two. Release him or take on 85% of the salary and move him. Those are the only two options that they have. I can see if they had we could do this or we could do that. No, you can't. You're not keeping Baker at $18 and at $19 million. After everything that you put that man through, after what he took out of that article and said in that paper, y'all done.
He brings up another good point. Browns don't have that many options, right? This is why Even though people get mad at me every time I say it in the comment section, I will continue to say it because it does make sense. They really don't have that many options. I don't know how many teams want to take him at 85% of the salary while also giving up a 6th-round pick. That sounds crazy, but that's the reality we live in. I don't know if even if you offered that, which is embarrassing, if somebody would take that for him right now, given that they know that the cut is inevitable. Because the Browns got to do something, because keeping Baker Mayfield on the roster when you're clearly not going to have him play. Like, it is clear as day. He ain't going to play. He is not going to prepare to play for the Cleveland Browns anymore. Like, Baker has said it himself. He is done. He's not playing for the Browns anymore. Baker has said this. The Cleveland Browns have acknowledged this by bringing in a bunch of quarterbacks to fill up that room that clearly don't include Baker Mayfield. So if that's the case, if the Browns don't want him there and he don't want to be here, he's not going to take up a roster spot in the hopes that you might be able to get something for him while still eating that salary. It's just that it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make any sense. You can try to make it make sense. You can try to do all these other things. And sure, in a control world on paper, it might make sense. It might be logical. But in the real world, when you're dealing with people, that don't make no sense. And I think Shannon, who has clearly, Shannon Sharp, he's a Hall of Famer. He's been in the NFL locker room. He knows how these dynamics go. He's acknowledging that part of it. Now, I wish he would have acknowledged more of like, why hasn't Baker been traded? You know, that some of that has to do with Baker himself. The reason why he can't get moved. I think the Browns would have moved him months ago if they could. Nobody wanted him. That's the problem. Now let's just hear Skip. Well, not Skip. Yeah, Skip. Let's hear Skip Bayless out. We kind of know what this is going to be.
Thank you for everything you just said, because I think you're starting to see the light on Baker Mayfield. I keep tweeting #free Baker, cut Baker, cut him loose, let him go on.
This ain't got nothing to do with this whole thing, but like, when's the last time you saw somebody like use a hashtag and be like, I'm gonna join it? If you're under like 40. If you're older, I ain't going to judge you for using hashtag however you want, bro. Like, do you. At that point, you OG status. I'm not about to ridicule you about how you use the internet if you over 40. But if you under 40, when the last time you done actually did a hashtag on Twitter? I'm just saying. Now, Skip is obviously over 40. Like, he can do whatever he want on Twitter. He old enough. But I'm just saying. That just brought back memories.
Because right now, as I predicted from day one, we're in the midst of the biggest offseason game of chicken this NFL has ever seen. What we have is we've got Seahawks and we got Panthers, and we may have 2 or 3 other teams lying in the weeds out there just waiting for the Cleveland Clowns to be forced to be back so far into the corner that they finally say, like, okay, we give up, we flat out cut him, we'll pay his total salary. Those teams are trying to dig in and protect their salary caps, $19 million worth, and hope that the Clowns will pay the freight for their prosperity next year. I wouldn't be surprised if Baker is actually already conspiring with his team of choice to say, you got to.
His team of choice. Like the Colts were his team of choice, Skip, that he was conspiring with. Come on now. I mean, how many team of choices have we been through with this whole Baker ordeal? It was the Panthers. Well, not the Panthers. It was never the Panthers, but it was the Seahawks, and it was Indy. They're going to scoop him up in a heartbeat. I wish, because I wish he would have been traded months ago, just for both of the parties' sake at this point.
Stay the course, dig in, force them to cut you. Obviously, he's not going to show up for any OTAs, and obviously the Browns are completely dug in because not only do they have Deshaun, but they've already signed 2 other quarterbacks in Brissett and Joshua Dobbs. They're set. The quarterback room is set. Baker has no spot there. For a while, I thought, well, maybe the Clowns are thinking, gee, if Deshaun gets suspended for maybe 8 games, maybe we want to hang on to Baker and say, let's scratch each other's backs where you can continue to audition for another team for your next job and get us through the night without Deshaun and maybe keep us afloat until he comes back. Well, that ain't happening because it's just not realistic for that to happen, to have Baker Mayfield trying to quarterback the Browns, who have shamed him and humiliated him and dumped all over him.
Let's just say, for the sake of argument, you're under.
All right, so I mean, standard Skip Bayless affair there, right? You know, he's a big Baker Mayfield guy. You know, not much needs to be said there. The only thing I'll say is I think Skip has done what I think a lot of people who are on this pro Baker side have done, which is, you know, sometimes I think, you know, you get a lot of information and some of it's not good information, but it's the information you want to hear. And I think that overinflates what you think somebody's value is. There is not an all-time game of chicken going on here in the NFL. Nobody is planning their offseason on the anticipation that they can get Baker Mayfield. Nobody is planning their season program on the anticipation that they get Baker Mayfield. The reality is at this point, if somebody acquires Baker Mayfield's going to enter a quarterback room to truly compete for a starting job. Now, he will probably win the starting job if he goes to Seattle. He would probably win the starting job if he went to Carolina. I don't know. Sometimes weird things happen with rookies. They might put Matt Corral over him, but I think it would be pretty obvious that Baker Mayfield's probably going to be the best quarterback for Carolina or Seattle. The thing is that nobody is clamoring for it. And here's the thing that I think people have a hard time understanding with this whole Baker Mayfield situation. It is not that Baker Mayfield is such a terrible quarterback that nobody wants him on their team. It's that what he offers, not a lot of teams want. What do I mean by that? Well, there are a lot of teams in the NFL, almost all of them, who want a really, really good quarterback, hopefully cheap, but just want a really good quarterback. That guy, easy to move. A cheap young quarterback, easy to move. An expensive 27-year-old quarterback, nah, he's $18 million, but it's not super expensive, but an expensive $18 million quarterback who's 27, who may or may not be good in a given year because he's been up and down. Well, that's much harder to move. That's why Jimmy Garoppolo hasn't moved. That's why Baker Mayfield hasn't moved. That middle tier of quarterback has become undesirable by NFL front offices because they either want to bottom out or they want a chance to win the Super Bowl. Nobody wants to be just a playoff team anymore, which means that market that a Baker Mayfield 10 years ago, if Baker Mayfield were in this situation, he would have been traded in a heartbeat because teams wanted that mid-tier option. Teams believed that they could win with that mid-tier option. Now teams don't believe that with a mid-tier quarterback, they can do anything but be mediocre and maybe make the playoffs at best. And when that's the case, it just makes your value hard to quantify at $18 million. That is the reason that Baker Mayfield has not been traded. Other reasons factor into this, right? His behavior in the offseason, not saying he's done anything criminal or anything like that, but he has just handled himself in a way that makes people hesitant to trust him in a quarterback competition setting, given that, you know, he kind of freaked out that the Browns were thinking about bringing in competition. You know, people have concerns about whether he can put his ego aside and compete. That's a real concern with people in the NFL right now about Baker Mayfield, whether you feel like it's fair or not. And I think that's the main reason why people are kind of hesitant. Now, that's going to be part one of this video. I'm going to drop a part two where we're reacting to another one, where they're reacting to a quote from Nick Chubb. We're going to get this all out one day and then move on, or maybe one weekend, and then move on from it and talk about some actual football once the start of the week starts. But just wanted to get this one out the way because I feel like pretty soon we're going to be done with this whole conversation, hopefully, because something could happen. But we'll see what happens over the weekend. But that's it for this part of the video. Check out the next part. This is interesting, man. This is interesting to go through. Y'all have a great day. Have a good night.